our debt and deficit problems as a country. We've seen the signals that we've gotten from the financial markets. We've heard what our constituents have said, and that it is very important that we bring the kinds of spending reductions and reforms that we need to this debate. So I urge a no vote, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back the balance of his time, both sides having yielded back all of their time. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 1954? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the Chair, two-thirds not being in the affirmative, the rules are not suspended and the bill is not passed. Gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Camp, is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I demand the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. All those in favor of taking this vote on the yeas and nays will rise and remain standing until counted. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered pursuant to Clause 8, Rule 20. Further proceedings on this question will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass the manager's amendment to H.R. 1484 as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 1484, a bill to amend Title 38, United States Code, to improve the appeals process of the Department of Veterans Affairs and to establish a commission to study judicial review of the determination of veterans' benefits.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Miller, and the gentleman from California, Mr. Filner, will each control 20 minutes. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Miller.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I might consume.
Without objection,
I thank you for the recognition. I rise today in strong support of the manager's amendment to H.R. 1484, titled Veterans Appeals Improvement Act of 2011. This legislation is a product of the committee's continued oversight of the disability claims process. We continue to look for ways to improve this laborious process and ensure that veterans receive their disability claims and the decisions in a timely and accurate fashion. Now, under current law, veterans who disagree with their initial claims decision by VA can appeal to VA's Board of Veterans' Appeals, but if a veteran submits additional evidence before the board in support of their claims, it automatically goes back to the beginning, the very beginning of the process. The legislation before us would stop the shuffling of veterans back to the end of the line. That it would direct that evidence submitted by a veteran in support of an appeal before the Board of Veterans' Appeals be considered by the board unless the veteran himself or herself elects to send it back to the very beginning of the process. This provision has garnered wide support from the veteran service organizations and the Department of Veterans Affairs, and I believe it will reduce the frustration that many of our veterans face when appealing a ratings decision and also reduce processing times. And I want to thank the ranking member, Mr. Filner, for introducing this legislation, and I do urge all members to vote in support of the manager's amendment to H.R. 1484 and reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Florida reserves. The gentleman from California, Mr. Filner, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield to myself as much time as I may consume.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized.
And I want to say first I appreciate the Chairman's cooperation in bringing these bills to the floor. We're a day after Memorial Day, but these are important to honor veterans, and I thank him and also urge that his manager's amendment, which took care of a funding issue, be approved. So I am in strong support of this bill, and I thank the members of the Subcommittee on Disability Assistance and Memorial Affairs have worked very hard in moving this bill forward. It's been quite a long time coming to fruition, and I know that many of our stakeholders look forward to its passage today. In the last Congress and this one, the Committee on Veterans Affairs held a multitude of hearings on the language that is in the bill today. It was developed as a result of vigorous oversight, hearings, meetings conducted in the past two Congresses. We received expert input from many of our stakeholders on the myriad systemic and vexing issues surrounding the whole process of claims appeals. As such, Section 2 of the bill would allow the Board of Veterans' Appeals to review evidence submitted directly to it by the veteran or survivor without issuing often unnecessary supplemental statements of the case that serve only to delay and to deny. I know that many stakeholders are anxious to see this provision enacted, including the VA itself. Section 3 of the bill would have established a commission, a judicial review commission, that would have been made up of 11 expert members to tackle other long-standing appellate review issues facing our veterans and survivors. These issues have included whether to continue the Federal Circuit Court review of decisions of the Court of Appeal of Veterans Claims, whether to grant class action and associational standing to the Veterans Court, and whether to require a decision on all issues raised on appeal, just to name a few. And the Commission would have been required to report on its finding and recommended in Congress and would not sunset until 2 years after that time. However, we were not able to move this section forward because of certain de minimis costs associated with operating the Commission. And I know that we all have a bit of Commission fatigue anyway, but at some point, this is an unexamined area with divergent and broad concepts that are in dire need of concentrated and expert attention. So I hope, Mr. Chairman, that we find a way to fund this Commission in the near future. I look forward to working with Mr. Miller in a bipartisan manner to make this a reality. So I ask all my colleagues to support the bill in its amended form, and I would reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from California reserves his time. The gentleman from Florida, Mr. Miller, is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to yield at this time as much time as he may consume. The chairman of the Subcommittee on Disability Assistance and Memorial Affairs, Mr. Runyon of New Jersey.
The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized for as much time as he wishes to consume.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Chairman, for the time. I rise today in support of the manager's amendment to H.R. 1484 as amended and the Veterans Appeals Improvement Act of 2011. The Veterans Disability Claims Policy is very complex, and all of us at the Veterans Affairs Committee are constantly seeking ways to improve the process for both our veterans and the VA. This bill is a good first step in accomplishing the goal by improving upon the current process. Specifically, Section 2, which will work to simplify the process for submitting the evidence to the Board of Veterans' Appeals by allowing veterans to keep their place in line at the Board of Appeals for veterans' claims when they submit new evidence in support of their claim. Under current law, if a veteran submitted new evidence to their case, the intention of expediting their adjudication may have actually made the adjudication take longer due to the VA's archaic rules in requiring the agency to resubmit the claim back to the regional offices. This bill corrects that problem. While I'm hopeful that the VA's new electronic processing system, which is currently being developed, will alleviate the backlog, we must do right by our veterans by continually improving the claims process and continuing to make changes, no matter how small, to help our veterans who are currently stuck in a failed paper-based system. This bill is one of many steps my subcommittee will take on this Congress to address the backlog of certain veteran disability claims. On Thursday, the subcommittee will be holding a hearing on underperforming regional offices, and my staff is currently working on ways to improve training and accountability at VA regional offices. Every veteran has the right to have their claim adjudicated in a prompt and accurate fashion. I'm proud that many veteran service organizations, as well as the VA, has expressed support for H.R. 1484 as amended, and I urge all members to support H.R. 1484 as amended, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from New Jersey yields back his time. The gentleman from Florida, Mr. Miller, reserves. The gentleman from California, Mr. Filner, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I just want to point out to the chair of the subcommittee, and I guess the chair of the committee also, we're taking an important step today, but it is a small step. And the chair, gentleman from New Jersey, mentioned other small steps. We ain't going to clean up this backlog problem, which approaches 1 million cases without major step, a major blowing up of the whole way we do this stuff. We just hired 10,000 new people, and the claims process, I mean the number of claims backlog doubled. So we're not getting anywhere with this brute force kind of thing. I have suggested many times to just cut out the red tape completely, at least in the short term, to clean up the backlog, to say to those who have submitted claims with, that are backed up both by the medical evidence and help from veteran service officers, of which we have thousands certified across the nation, that we ought to accept those claims and honor the service of our veterans. Until we get to a mindset that says blow up the bureaucracy in this thing, we're not going to solve the problem. So all these small steps will be taken forever. Let's pass this small step today, but let us take on a much bigger honoring of our veterans, as we just talked about on Memorial Day, by saying, you know, some of you have died while waiting for this process to continue. Some of you have lost your homes because you didn't get a disability check. Let's really honor our veterans this Memorial Day and say, let's change the whole system that we have and stop trying to fool around with these small steps. I would reserve the balance of my time.
From Florida, Mr. Miller is recognized.
I have no further speakers, Mr. Speaker, and I'm prepared to close.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from California.
I have no further speakers. I would urge adoption of the bill and yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from California yields back his time. The gentleman from Florida.
I associate myself with the remarks of my colleague, the ranking member. This issue of the disability claims backlog has haunted this Congress and this committee for many, many years, but nobody's more haunted by it than the veterans who have to go through that process. We together in a bipartisan way are looking for a way to try to solve this issue, and it's obvious that money in bodies is not the way to do it. So together, Mr. Fillner and I and the members of our committees will work together and try to bring a reasonable solution to this Congress that will help resolve the million veterans that are out there right now in backlog waiting for the disability claims. I ask unanimous consent that all members who will have 5 legislative days for which to revise and extend their remarks and submit extraneous material on the manager's amendment of H.R. 1407 as amended.
Without objection, so ordered.
And once again, I encourage all members to support the manager's amendment to H.R. 1484 as amended and yield back my time.
Gentleman yields back his time, all time having expired. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 1484 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the Chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. The bill is passed, and without objection,
Mr. Speaker,
the gentleman from Florida is recognized.
I ask for the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. All those in favor of taking this vote by the yeas and nays will rise and remain standing until counted. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered pursuant to Clause 8, Rule 20. Further proceedings on this question will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I do now move to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 802 as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Union Calendar Number 41, H.R. 802, a bill to direct the Secretary of Veterans Affairs to establish a VetStar Award program.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Miller, and the gentleman from California, Mr. Fillner, will each control 20 minutes. Mr. Miller.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized.
I rise today in support of H.R. 802 as amended, a bill introduced by Ranking Member Fillner to direct the Secretary of Veterans Affairs to establish a VetStar Award program. Mr. Speaker, the VetStar Award program would recognize private sector businesses which excel in promoting the hiring of veterans. In the tough economy that we're in, unemployment among veterans is too high. According to the Department of Labor, 11% of veterans from the conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan were unemployed during the month of April. I'm confident that you and all the members would agree that we need to use every tool at our disposal to bring that number down. Our nation's veterans bring a unique set of qualifications and skills to any job, and while many in the private sector understand their value, more must be done. H.R. 802 as amended would recognize businesses who have done their part and promoted veterans for employment. This is a great, no-cost way of recognizing those employers who have already stepped up to the plate and helped our veterans. And I want to thank the ranking member, Mr. Filner, for this bill and urge all of my colleagues to support H.R. 802 as amended, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Florida reserves. The gentleman from California, Mr. Filner, is recognized.
And I would yield myself such time as I may consume.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized.
Again, I want to thank the chair of our VA committee for the incredible cooperative effort we have devoted so far in this Congress. He mentioned on the last bill that we are united to try to find a way to cut through these intolerable and inexcusable delays in the disability claims process. And we are working together as a top priority to make sure that those who have served this nation have a job when they get back, because that, of course, leads to everything else good in our society. A good job is what is needed, and we are united to saying to our veterans, this is going to be our top priority. What we have done here in H.R. 802 is, again, a small step which will highlight efforts and create an incentive for businesses to hire veterans by directing the VA to develop a very low-cost annual award program to recognize businesses who contribute to veterans' employment. The award to be displayed by business owners as a recognition of the business owner's commitment to the veteran community. I think the First Lady and the Second Lady of this country are doing much to promote what our nation is doing for families of veterans. The White House might convene a summit of those who are both helping and will pledge to help hire veterans and highlight this issue more for all Americans. This bill would authorize the VA to advertise the program in the national media and allow the public to be educated on those businesses that support the employment of veterans. Again, I thank the chairman for scheduling the bill. It's part of our Labor Day, our Memorial Day tribute to our veterans, and ask that our colleagues support the legislation and reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from California reserves his time. The gentleman from Florida, Mr. Miller, is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to yield as much time as he may consume to the chairman of the Subcommittee on Economic Opportunity, Mr. Stutzman, of the great state of Indiana.
The gentleman is recognized for as much time as he wishes to consume.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the chairman. I rise today in strong support of H.R. 802 as amended, as this bill would require the Department of Veterans Affairs to establish an award program to recognize businesses which excel in hiring veterans. We all know the unemployment problems facing many of our veterans. Our youngest groups of veterans have the highest unemployment rates among all the veterans, while older veterans between the ages of 35 and 64 make up two-thirds of the unemployed veteran population. As we look for ways to increase veteran employment rates, it is absolutely appropriate that we honor those businesses which make the effort to hire veterans and to emphasize and to recognize their efforts. This award not only highlights employers who currently hire veterans, but it is my hope that it will also serve as an incentive for other employers to hire more veterans as well. At the Subcommittee on Economic Opportunity legislative hearing on the bill, some witnesses suggested that the program would be appropriately sponsored by the Veterans Employment and Training Service. While not required by the bill, I hope that the VA will consult with the Department of Labor during the selection process. I can tell you as a small business owner and one that highly values the service of our veterans to our country, I believe that this is a wonderful measure to recognize those businesses who not only go out of their way but make it a priority to hire veterans to work at their businesses. So, Mr. Speaker, highlighting businesses for their support of veterans seeking employment is the right thing to do, and I urge my colleagues to support Ranking Member Filner's bill, and I appreciate him bringing the bill forward, and I yield back.
The gentleman from Indiana yields back his time. The gentleman from Florida reserves. The gentleman from California is recognized.
Does the gentleman have any further speakers?
We have no further speakers.
I would again urge support of the bill and yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from California yields back his time. The gentleman from Florida.
Again, I thank the ranking member for bringing this bill to the floor. I would add that tomorrow morning the full committee will be having a hearing at 10 a.m. Titled Putting American Veterans Back to Work. But also, please ask my friend, the ranking member, not to give all the good ideas to the White House, because you and I are going to be working together on a summit that will bring together those individuals who are wanting good employees to hire and highlight the veterans community to them for employment in their companies. Once again, I ask unanimous consent that all members would have 5 legislative days to revise and extend and add any extraneous material on H.R. 802 as amended.
Without objection, so ordered.
And I encourage all members to support H.R. 802 as amended and yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Florida yields back his time. All time having expired, the question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 802 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative. Gentleman from Florida.
I request the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. All those in favor of taking this vote by the yeas and nays will rise and remain standing until counted. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Missouri seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass the bill S. 1082 to provide for a temporary extension of programs under the Small Business Act and the Small Business Investment Act of 1958 and for other purposes.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Senate 1082, an act to provide for an additional temporary extension of programs under the Small Business Act and the Small Business Investment Act of 1958 and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Graves, and the gentlewoman from New York, Ms. Velasquez, will each control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Missouri.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members shall have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on the bill under consideration.
Without objection, so ordered. Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd yield myself such time as I may consume.
Without objection.
The legislation we have before us is a short-term extension of programs that helps our nation's small businesses. Last week, the House passed a bill by voice vote to extend these programs for 4 months until the end of the fiscal year. Unfortunately, that bill was used as a vehicle to pass the Patriot Act authorization, so we have a new bill before us today. Like the bill the House passed last week, this legislation extends the authorization of the Small Business Innovative Research and Small Business Technology Transfer programs until the end of the fiscal year. These 2 programs provide R&D dollars to small businesses to create jobs, spur innovative ideas to the market, and solve federal agency problems, all at no additional cost to the government. Secondly, the bill extends for 2 months until July 31st, 2011, the authorization of several other programs at the Small Business Administration. Among them is the Pre-Disaster Mitigation Program that provides loans to small businesses so they can implement technology that will reduce the impact of disasters on their operations. With the recent devastation we've seen in the Midwest, including in my home state of Missouri, and with the hurricane season right around the corner, it's imperative that this program continue for small firms who wish to bolster their disaster plans. Mr. Speaker, this is bipartisan legislation that is the support of the administration as well as the leadership of both parties on the other side of the Capitol. It is important that we do not let these programs lapse, because they will expire if we do not pass this legislation today. This is the last day. I urge my colleagues to support our nation's small businesses and vote yes on S. 1082, and I'd reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Missouri reserves his time. The gentlewoman from New York, Ms. Velasquez, is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, the role of small businesses in moving the economy forward has never been more important. Making up over 99% of all U.S. firms, they are critical to innovation, wealth creation, and most importantly, employment gains. Many look to the SBA for assistance, using its loan, contracting, and training programs to start up or expand. Unfortunately, the legislation before us, while seemingly uncontroversial, could make it harder for small businesses to access the very tools and resources. This bill, if passed, will break with long-standing House precedent and choose winners and losers among SBA programs. By doing so, it will create confusion among small firms seeking to use the agency's initiatives. As many of you know, since September 30th, 2006, the SBA has been operating under a series of 12 temporary extensions. While these extensions have varied in length, they have always treated all of the agency's programs and initiatives equally. This has resulted in all of the SBA programs operating unimpeded, ensuring that small businesses have ready access to the tools and resources they need. Unfortunately, S. 1082 takes the unprecedented step of setting different authorization periods for certain SBA programs, creating a maze of confusing dates and deadlines for small businesses. During a time when efforts are being made to reduce regulatory burden, Congress should make certain that it is not adding to it by its own unnecessary actions. Given the extraordinary nature of S. 1082, it should not be considered and fast-tracked on the suspension calendar, which is typically reserved for uncontroversial measures. Instead, such a unique and precedent-setting measure should go through regular order, where members will have an opportunity to amend this unexpected and highly unusual piece of legislation. At a minimum, this will enable members to have more time to understand the detrimental impact this legislation could have on small businesses. Small businesses such as those represented by the U.S. Women's Chamber of Commerce also oppose this legislation. Voting against this extension will not affect any agency program in a meaningful way. Small businesses will still be able to secure financing, receive contracts, and access training through the agency's initiatives. What a vote against this legislation will do, however, is ensure that we produce a more equitable piece of legislation that treats all agencies' initiatives fairly. If parties are serious about helping small businesses, they will reject this measure and work expeditiously to approve a more responsible extension. I urge my colleagues to vote no, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The woman from New York reserves her time. The gentleman from Missouri is recognized.
I don't have any speakers, Mr. Speaker, so I would reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman
If the gentleman
reserves.
has no further speakers, I will yield back.
The gentlewoman from New York yields back her time. The gentleman from Missouri is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the ranking member. In closing, just let me reiterate, this is a simple short-term extension of programs that are very important to our nation's small business. We aren't changing any policy here. We're just extending them until hopefully we can work out the differences with the other body on the other side of the Capitol. Again, I urge my colleagues to vote aye or vote yes on S. 1082 and keep these programs running so we can hopefully work out these differences. With that, I would yield back the balance of my time, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from Missouri yields back his time, all time having expired. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass Senate 1082? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no.
Oh.
In the opinion of the chair, two-thirds being in the affirmative, the gentlewoman from New York is recognized.
I ask for a recorded vote.
The gentlewoman is asking for the yeas and nays.
Correct.
The yeas and nays are requested. All those in favor of taking this vote by the yeas and nays will rise and remain standing until counted. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8, Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. Say again. For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and adopt Senate Concurrent Resolution 16.
The clerk will report the title of the concurrent resolution.
Concurrent resolution authorizing the use of Emancipation Hall in the Capitol Visitor Center for an event to celebrate the birthday of King Kamehameha.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from California, Mr. Lundgren, and the gentlewoman from Hawaii, Ms. Hanabusa, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Lundgren.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks.
Without objection, so ordered. The gentleman is recognized.
I ask unanimous consent to enter into the congressional record a letter waiving further committee consideration of the matter now before the House.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized for as much time as he wishes to consume.
Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to support this resolution authorizing the use of Emancipation Hall on June 5th to celebrate the birthday of King Kamehameha of Hawaii. King Kamehameha, often called Kamehameha the Great, is a legendary figure in Hawaiian history and culture, and rightly so. He fought heroically for its unity and independence at the end of the 18th and the beginning of the 19th centuries. His law, or rule of the splintered paddle, protecting non-combatants during wartime, has been commended for its justness and established a human rights benchmark that would later be built upon in the Geneva Conventions. An illustrious statue of King Kamehameha is part of the National Statuary Hall collection, and it now sits in the Capitol Visitor Center, visible to millions of our fellow citizens. On June 11th, the people of Hawaii will celebrate the 95th annual King Kamehameha Day in Hawaii. In adopting the resolution, the members of the House will join our colleagues in the Senate in authorizing the use of the Capitol Visitor Center for a similar celebration here in Washington, D.C. I urge my colleagues to join me in support of this resolution, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from California, Mr. Lundgren, reserves the balance of his time. The gentlewoman from Hawaii, Ms. Hanabusa, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Senate Concurrent Resolution 16 is entitled Authorizing the Use of the Emancipation Hall in the Capitol Visitor Center for an event to celebrate the birthday of King Kamehameha. It speaks to authorizing the use of June 5th, 2011, and states that the preparations for the ceremony shall be carried out with such conditions as may be prescribed by the architect of the Capitol. This is not an unusual event. This will be the 42nd time such a celebration has taken place within the Capitol. This is Hawaii's way to share its most unique history with all. June 11th, the day of celebration, is the birthday of King Kamehameha the Great. He was born around 1758 and is credited with unifying the 8 major islands by the year 1810. Of course, the islands of Kauai and Niihau claimed that they eluded him. This holiday was first decreed in 1871 when Hawaii was still a kingdom by Kamehameha V, his great-grandson. It was the first holiday proclaimed by the governor and legislature when Hawaii became a state in 1959. The celebration in his honor is about 140 years old this year. And what we identify with the celebration, the statue of King Kamehameha and the traditional lei draping, is over 100 years old itself. The American sculptor Thomas R. Gould was commissioned by the Kingdom of Hawaii to create the statue. He did so in 1879 from his studio in Rome. It was completed in 1880, but the ship that was transporting it from Germany sank. It was in 1883 when the second statue made its way to Hawaii. It stands 8.5 feet tall, with the king in his royal garb. The helmet is depicted to reflect that it is made out of red, very rare feathers, as is his cloak. The spear in his left hand is a symbol that his kingdom is willing to defend itself. And yet his right hand is extended in the gesture of aloha, to welcome, that gesture which is synonymous with Hawaii. The statue that stands here is the mold of the second statute, which stands in front of Ali'iolani, the home of the Hawaii Supreme Court. Many actually would recognize it as the new headquarters of Hawaii 5-0. This was dedicated as a gift to the National Sanctuary Hall for from Hawaii in the year 1969. Of note is that the first statute was found and brought to the Big Island of Hawaii, the birth isle of King Kamehameha I. The tradition of the lei draping dates back to 1901 when Hawaii was still a territory. I personally recall it as a child with firefighters draping the leis on the statue using their very long ladders. We remember it clearly with the longest strands of the yellow plumeria blossoms being the flower of choice. These lei drapings take place on the Big Island as well, and has for 42 years also taken place in the capital. On June 10, 2010, President Obama issued Proclamation 8534 in honor of the bicentennial of the unification of Hawaii. The President, who like me and others were born in Hawaii, and recognizes the significance of King Kamehameha to our history. A relevant part of his statement is, on this bicentennial King Kamehameha Day, we celebrate the history and heritage of the Aloha State, which has immeasurably enriched our national life and culture. The Hawaiian narrative is one of both profound triumph and sadly deep injustice. It is a story of Native Hawaiians oppressed by crippling disease, aborted treaties, and the eventual conquest of their sovereign kingdom. These grim milestones remind us of an unjust time in our history, as well as the many pitfalls in our nation's long and difficult journey to perfect itself. Yet, through the peaks and valleys of our American story, Hawaii's steadfast sense of community and mutual support shows the progress that results when we are united in spirit and limitless possibility. I'd like to also add, as Chair Lundgren pointed out, what King Kamehameha is also known for is creating the law of the land, the law, as we call it, the law of the splintered paddle. In Hawaii, we also call it Ke Kanawai Mamalahoi. This is an interesting story and one that people may not believe. It is really the story of a warrior king and his humanity. It was a law to protect the civilians at the time of war. It is a lesson in human life because the king, warrior king, decreed that any human life was precious and it was wrong for the powerful to mistreat the weaker. Though many of us think of it as a celebration with parades and, as we call it at home, ho'olauleas, festivities and parties, it is more importantly a symbol of that which is Hawaii, that which makes us so unique. I would like to express my appreciation on behalf of the people of Hawaii to Speaker Boehner, Chairman Lundgren, the architect of the Capitol Police, and all others who assist in this event. At this time, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to inquire as to whether there's any other speakers. There are no other speakers. Then, Mr. Speaker, I yield back the remainder of my time.
The gentlewoman from Hawaii yields back the remainder of her time. The gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, in closing, I would just say that it gives me great pleasure to join my colleague from Hawaii and bring this resolution to the floor, particularly because my daughter, who was married in this town on Sunday, is on her way to Hawaii to celebrate her honeymoon, and I believe will actually still be there on the 5th of June, so that she will see that up close and personal. So I would urge all my colleagues to support this resolution, and with that, Mr. Speaker, I would yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from California yields back his time, all time having expired. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and agree to Senate Concurrent Resolution 16? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the Chair, two-thirds being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the concurrent resolution is agreed to, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
Just start reading your time. Okay.
Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, proceedings will resume on motions to suspend the rules previously postponed. Votes will be taken in the following order. H.R. 1484 by the yeas and nays. S. 1082 by the yeas and nays. H.R. 1954 by the yeas and nays. The first electronic vote will be conducted as a 15-minute vote. Remaining electronic votes will be conducted as a 5-minute vote. The unfinished business is the vote on the motion of the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Miller, to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 1484 as amended, on which the yeas and nays are ordered. The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 1484, a bill to amend Title 38 United States Code to improve the appeals process of the Department of Veterans Affairs and to establish a commission to study judicial review of the determination of veterans' benefits.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill as amended? Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 15-minute vote.
The House voting now on a measure dealing with veterans' benefits. We heard debate earlier a short time ago, and later on during this series of votes, there'll be a vote on a measure that would raise the national debt ceiling $2.4 trillion without any spending cuts or changes to the budget process. Here's more from a reporter covering the debate. While we wait for that interview on the debt ceiling, a little bit of background on that. The debt ceiling is the upper limit on the amount of debt the federal government can borrow to operate the country's economic activities. Congress passed a debt ceiling law in 1917, and according to the Congressional Research Service, the debt ceiling has been raised 74 times since March 1962. The most recent time was in February 2010. As this House vote continues on veterans' benefits, a story in Congressional Quarterly, House Republican leaders are urging their rank and file to vote against a measure that would raise the federal debt limit to $16.7 trillion without any accompanying proposal to cut spending. Speaker John Boehner and his leadership team contend the vote, which is scheduled for after the financial markets close, shortly in this series of votes. They'll demonstrate that there is insufficient support in the House to raise the debt limit without making a corresponding spending cuts. Republicans are expected to be largely unified in voting against the debt limit increase. And Minority Whip Steny Hoyer said today that he would advise Democrats to vote no or present on raising the debt limit. Here's that interview we did earlier about the measure. Andy Sullivan, correspondent for Reuters, why have House Republicans scheduled a vote to raise the debt limit knowing it'll fail?
I think this bolsters their argument that you can't pass a debt limit increase without substantial spending cuts as they're calling for.
Well, how are financial markets expected to react if the vote fails as predicted?
I would be surprised if financial markets reacted at all. They've been very aware of the sort of politics of this going forward, and in the meantime, Treasury rates have been almost at historical lows. I think today they're at a new 2011 low for the year, so they don't seem to be concerned so far.
Treasury Secretary Tim Geithner has said that the government will default on its loans if lawmakers don't agree to raise the debt ceiling by August 2nd. Do Republicans accept this? If not, how do they counter?
There has been some discussion among some Republicans that if this August 2nd date rolls around and Treasury is out of options, that it wouldn't necessarily be the end of the world, because we would still have enough tax revenue coming in to service our ongoing debt obligations. Of course, this would mean deep, deep spending cuts in other areas of government, such as paying federal employees' salaries or paying for the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. They argue that the Treasury can make this a priority, and even if bondholders missed a few payments, it wouldn't be the end of the world, because they would understand that the country is getting its fiscal house in order.
House Minority Whip Steny Hoyer met with reporters today and said that the vote is nothing more than a, quote, political charade. Why does he say that, and how is he urging Democrats to vote?
Well, 114 Democrats backed President Obama's position back in April that we needed a clean debt ceiling increase without any changes to spending. This really puts them on the spot, and Mr. Hoyer argued that this would really open them up for demagoguery and attack ads by saying they're signing on to additional debt. And so he is advising his members to not vote for the measure.
There have been ongoing debt reduction negotiations between Congress and the White House. How might this vote today affect those negotiations?
Well, I think Republicans will say this bolsters their position that you can't get a straight debt limit vote through the House. It also comes on the heels of a series of votes last week in the Democratic-controlled Senate, where they voted down several Republican budget plans that would have made deep spending cuts, as well as Obama's initial budget proposal. So this is sort of the latest in a series of sort of show votes that the people who call them up don't expect or hope them to pass.
Andy Sullivan is a correspondent for Reuters. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And we expect that vote on the debt ceiling to happen about 7 p.m. Eastern Time. We have one more vote until that vote, about 7 p.m. Eastern Time on that debt ceiling vote. Tomorrow on Washington Journal, a couple of members of Congress will be on the program to talk about that clean debt ceiling that the House is going to take shortly. Republican Phil Gingrey of Georgia will be on at 7:45 a.m. Eastern Time. Democrat Jackie Speer of California on at 8:30 Eastern. Washington Journal is here on C-SPAN every morning. Also tomorrow, President Obama is meeting with all 241 Republican conference members. It's the president's first meeting with all the Republicans since they won the majority in the House in November. President Obama nominated businessman John Bryson to lead the Commerce Department. The Congressional Quarterly reporting that Senate Republicans reiterated today that they'll block all trade-related executive branch nominees, including President Obama's new nominee for Commerce. That's until the administration sends 3 trade agreements to the Senate for approval. The months-long standoff complicates the Senate confirmation prospects for John Bryson. The President made that announcement at the White House this afternoon. Here's that speech.
Good afternoon, everybody. Today, I am pleased to announce that I will nominate John Bryson to be our nation's next Commerce Secretary. John is somebody who will bring to this job a wealth of experience in the public and in the private sectors. But in my mind, nothing has prepared him more for this demanding role, a role that requires delicate diplomacy, complex negotiations, and careful management of folks with strong views than being the father of 4 daughters. They are all here today, as is John's wife, Louise, and I'm sure John agrees that Louise gets the credit for how wonderfully they have turned out. As Commerce Secretary, John is going to be an important part of my economic team, promoting American business and American products across the globe. By working with companies here at home and representing America's interests abroad, I'm confident that he's going to help us meet the goal that I set of doubling our nation's exports. In this new role, John will be able to draw on decades of business experience across a range of industries, from his role on the boards of major companies like Disney and Boeing to his leadership in the clean energy industry. That's the expertise that will help us create new jobs and make America more competitive in the global economy. Of course, John will be building on the success of outgoing Commerce Secretary Gary Locke, who has tirelessly advanced America's economic leadership abroad, securing export deals that will mean hundreds of thousands of jobs here in America, including an agreement with China, where Gary will now be serving as our next ambassador. And we couldn't be prouder of him and are confident he is going to be doing an outstanding job there. Of course, in the years ahead, a key to achieving our export goal will be promoting clean energy in America. That's how we'll reduce our dependence on foreign oil, and that's how we'll encourage new businesses and jobs to take root on our shores. John understands this better than virtually anybody. Throughout a distinguished career in which he's led nonprofits, government agencies, and large companies, he's been a fierce proponent of alternative energy. As a young man with a degree in hand from a prestigious law school, John didn't follow his friends to a blue-chip law firm. John took a chance on an idea he cared about and co-founded the Natural Resources Defense Council, which grew into a powerful and important voice in protecting the safety of our air and water. It was then that John caught the eye of a young California governor named Jerry Brown. I'm not sure what happened to that guy, but for John it led to leadership positions in government, where he got a first-hand look at the real-life impact of energy and environmental policies, from water conservation to electricity production. Later, in the private sector, he rose to become the chairman and CEO of Edison International, one of the nation's largest utility companies. John headed the company for almost 20 years, during which time he helped Edison become a leader in solar and wind power and innovative approaches to proving the profitability of clean energy. Just before he retired from the company, he launched a plan to turn 65 million square feet of unused commercial rooftops into solar power stations, the largest array in the country, with enough electricity for more than 160,000 homes. Today, he advises companies around the world as a business leader who understands what it takes to innovate, to create jobs, and to persevere through tough times. And he continues to carry himself with the integrity and sense of responsibility that have guided him his entire life. This experience and these qualities will serve our nation well as John takes on yet another tough assignment in his career. So I want to thank Gary again for his extraordinary service. He has done an outstanding job while at Commerce. And John, I am grateful to you for your willingness to serve. I look forward to working with you, and I know that you will help us deliver the kinds of growth, prosperity, and job creation here in America that we all want. So thank you very much, both of you.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Congratulations.
President.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
2 more votes after this one, including a vote on a measure that would raise the national debt ceiling $2.4 trillion without any spending cuts or changes to the budget process. Here's some debate from earlier on that bill. We begin with Louisiana Congressman Steve Scalise.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the gentleman from Michigan for yielding. We're here today not talking about something as the other side would contend is a joke. This is a very serious issue, and I rise in opposition to an increase in the debt ceiling that would just give the President another couple of $1 trillion to keep spending the way he's been spending for the last 2 years. And I think Americans across the country recognize that this wild spending spree the President's been on the last 2 years has to come to an end. And it's going to start here on this House floor, where we're going to finally invoke fiscal discipline. You know, and of course, over 100 members of the other side have asked for a clean vote. They want another $110 billion, a trillion to keep going along, maybe $2 trillion, to keep spending of money that we don't have. And in fact, if you look at their plan not only will double the national debt in 5 years, which I guess they're okay with, but it also allows Medicare to go bankrupt. And we're not going to sit by and let Medicare go bankrupt. We're not going to sit by and let them keep spending money that we don't have. We're finally going to say enough is enough. We're going to put spending controls in place. And frankly, it would be irresponsible to increase the debt ceiling without reforms that actually start cutting spending and putting our country back on a path to a balanced budget. Now, maybe some on the other side don't want to see us get to a balanced budget, which is why they've dramatically increased spending over the last 4 years up until when Speaker Pelosi was fired. But frankly, the American people have said enough is enough. Stop the spending binge. Enough of giving the President this uncontrolled use of the American credit card. Let's start reining in spending. Let's put those controls in place. Let's get our country back on a path of fiscal sanity so we don't have these groups like S&P saying that they will downgrade the bond rating of the United States.
Will the gentleman yield to talk about some facts?
That's not something we can tolerate. And maybe the gentleman on the other side might want to, and I'm sure during your time you'll have the opportunity to address that.
I'd like to ask you a question,
but frankly, what we've got to do is start installing fiscal discipline back in this House, and we're going to start doing it now. And it means no more blank checks, no more unbridled spending. And so the President's going to have an opportunity to join us in that debate. But frankly, it starts tonight. And we say we're not going to keep giving that credit card limit to the President without real reforms. I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Camp, reserves. The gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Levin, is recognized.
It's now 3 minutes. It's now my pleasure to yield to the whip, Mr. Hoyer from Maryland, 3 minutes.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. Unfortunately, this is a serious issue on which serious time has not been allotted because you put this on suspension. This is a serious issue. Our country is in crisis from a fiscal standpoint. Now, I wanted the gentleman to yield because I don't think the gentleman has any idea what the facts are. 89% increase in the debt under Ronald Reagan. He could have vetoed every one of those bills. Under George Bush, 115% increase in the debt. Under Bill Clinton, less than 40. Ladies and gentlemen, this issue is an important issue that is being treated not as an adult. This is not the adult moment of which Speaker Boehner spoke. And you didn't mention that the budget you voted for, I presume, I'm not sure, increased the debt by $1.9 trillion between now and October 1st of this year. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not an honest debate. This is not an honest proposal. This is a serious issue. TARP was a serious issue, and the American public didn't want to see it passed. And had it not passed, we would have gone into depression. Who said that? George Bush, Hank Paulson, the Republican Secretary of Treasury, and Ben Bernanke, the Republican-appointed head of the Federal Reserve. It was a tough vote. And so what did we do for America? We came together, Republicans and Democrats, more Democrats supporting the Republican president's request than his own party, to save America from depression. We need to deal with this issue, ladies and gentlemen, of America, seriously. Not in 20-minute debates on each side, not as a simplistic suggestion that somehow President Obama caused this. $1.3 trillion in wars we haven't paid for, a drug prescription bill we haven't paid for, tax cuts that your party voted for, not mine, that we didn't pay for. Should we have tax cuts? That's fine, but we ought to pay for them, not have my great-grandson, who was just born a week ago, pay for it. That's what you're doing. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to vote no on this. We ought to vote for this. We ought to have a clean bill. And we ought to have both sides coming together and saying, America needs this for debts that we have incurred. What I tell town meetings is it's like you go to Macy's. You take out your credit card and you charge $200 worth of goods. And then you go home that night, your husband or your wife, you sit down and say, look, we got too much debt. We need to have a debt limit. Put a $100 debt limit on us. And then Macy's sends you a bill and you send them back a letter saying, no, I got a debt limit. It's $100. So you send them a check for $100. They send back a letter saying, hey, no more credit, and guess what? We're suing you. This debt limit extension is for what we have already incurred. This debt limit extension vote is about whether or not we're going to pay our bills. But I will tell you this, we're going to see how many of your folks vote for paying our bills.
The whip is so eloquent, I yield another 30 seconds.
The gentleman is recognized for 30
I'm looking
seconds.
forward to seeing how